good evening. Settle in if you would. The night is long and the North Pole is quiet, save for the whisper of the wind and the distant jingling of the elves finishing their final duties. My office smells of old parchment, pine needles, and the faint, sweet scent of cinnamon from Mrs. Claus's kitchen. From my great chair, I can see the aurora borealis dancing in the sky, a silent, celestial ballet of green and violet light. It's a sight that never grows old, yet it's a sight I often take for granted. After all these centuries, it's easy to become numb to magic. But then a story comes along, a story so pure, so profound, that it cuts through the centuries and reminds me all over again why I do what I do. It reminds me of the true, quiet heart of Christmas. This is one such story. It doesn't involve grand battles or epic journeys. It takes place in a time you might remember, a time of big hair, neon colors, and a certain earnest innocence. The year was 1984. And my sleigh was gliding over a town in the American Midwest, a place called Winchester Falls. It wasn't a sprawling city, but one of those prosperous, sprawling suburbs that had sprung up in the post-war boom. The kind of place that felt like the very picture of a perfect American life. From the air, it looks like a black velvet blanket thrown with handfuls of diamonds. Every house was adorned with the latest in Christmas technology, multicolored icicle lights dripping from the eaves, glowing plastic reindeer on the rooftops that nodded with a slow, mechanical dignity, and projectors casting spinning snowflakes onto garage doors. It was the height of 80s excess, a loud, joyful, and slightly gaudy celebration of the season. It was beautiful in its own way, but it was also a performance. My gaze, however, was drawn to one particular house on a quiet cul-de-sac named Evergreen Circle. It was a lovely two-story colonial, much like the others, but its yard held a different kind of magic. There, in the center of a pristine snow-covered lawn, stood a snowman. But he was more than just 3 lumpy balls of snow. He had a presence, a stillness that felt ancient and wise. I had watched his creation that afternoon through the frost-kissed window of my magical observation sphere. I saw 3 boys, their faces red and chapped from the cold, their breath blooming in the crisp air. The oldest was Leo, about 10, a natural leader with a serious expression that belied the twinkle in his eye. He was the architect. Billy packed the snow tighter. "We need a solid foundation," he'd commanded, his voice carrying in the still air. Billy, his younger brother, was a whirlwind of energy, maybe 7 years old, his job to roll the middle section. He grunted and groaned, pushing the growing ball of snow with all his might, his bright red snowsuit making him look like a frantic ladybug. And then there was Sam, their next-door neighbor, a small, quiet boy of 5, whose main contribution was a steady supply of sticks and stones he'd scavenged from under the snow. They built him with a kind of reverence. They didn't just slap the snow together, they sculpted it. Leo patted and smoothed the surface until it gleamed. They used 2 large, perfectly round, dark stones for eyes, not buttons, because, as Leo explained, he needs to see us. The nose was a perfect carrot, not too crooked, save from the bottom of the refrigerator. For his mouth, they didn't use a jagged line of pebbles, but a gentle upward curve of small, smooth stones, giving him a look of quiet contentment. The final touch was an old woolen scarf, a faded plaid pattern of green and blue that Leo's father had allowed him to use. They wrapped it carefully around his neck, and Leo stood back, hands on his hips, and declared, "He's finished." They called him Frosty, of course, but to me, he was the sentinel, the watcher. As the boys were called inside by the warm, inviting smell of hot chocolate and gingerbread emanating from their kitchen, the snowman was left alone, and that is when his true life began. From my vantage point, I could feel the world as he felt it. It wasn't a consciousness in the human sense, but an awareness, a pure and unbiased reception of the world around him. The cold didn't bother him. It was his very being. The wind that howled around him wasn't a threat, but a song, a lonely melody that shaped the drifts at his feet. His two stone eyes absorbed the world without judgment. He saw the frantic, blinking lights of the other houses, but he also saw the steady, warm glow from the windows of his own home. He saw through the glass. He saw Leo and Billy arguing good-naturedly over the last gingerbread man. He saw their father ruffling their hair, his face tired but full of love. He saw their mother wiping chocolate from a corner of Sam's mouth. He was a silent repository for these small, sacred moments of family life. He could hear too, not with ears, but with his entire being. He heard the muffled sound of a television from next door, the theme song to Cheers floating faintly on the air. He heard the distant jingle of a Salvation Army bell, a lonely, persistent call for charity. He heard the crunch of tires on a snowy street as a teenager in a Trans Am drove by a little too fast. The thumping bass of a Duran Duran song escaping his windows. He heard all of it, the symphony of a small town on Christmas Eve. And the smells. Oh, the smells were a tapestry of the season. The sharp, clean scent of wood smoke from a dozen chimneys. The sweet, cloying aroma of pine from Christmas trees, each one slightly different. The rich, buttery smell of baking cookies, the savory scent of a roasting turkey. He absorbed it all, a silent connoisseur of the holiday. He was the ultimate observer, a ghost made of snow, privy to the intimate, unguarded lives of the neighborhood. He felt their joy, their minor squabbles, their quiet contentment. And in the midst of all this warmth and life, he felt his own profound and beautiful solitude. It was not a loneliness of sadness, but a loneliness of purpose, though he did not yet know what that purpose was. As the evening deepened, the traffic in the neighborhood slowed. The lights in the houses began to go out one by one, like stars winking at the end of the night. The world grew quiet. The snow began to fall again, not in a blizzard, but in a gentle, silent cascade of fat, fluffy flakes. They landed on his shoulders, on his hat, dusting him with a fresh layer of white, making him seem even more a part of the landscape. He was no longer just a creation of the boys. He was becoming a part of the winter itself. It was around 10 o'clock that a new sound broke the silence. The low, steady hum of an engine and the crunch of tires on the driveway of his house. An old brown Buick Regal, the kind of car a grandparent would drive, pulled in. A woman got out, her movements slow and careful in the cold. This was Ellen or Leo's grandmother. She had driven for 3 hours through the snow to be with them for Christmas. She was a woman in her late 60s, her face a map of kind wrinkles, her white hair tucked neatly under a practical wool hat. She carried a large, flat box wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. The snowman watched her as she was greeted at the door by her son and daughter-in-law, their hugs warm and genuine. He saw Leo rush to her, his face lighting up with a love that was pure and uncomplicated. "Grandma, you made it!" he shouted, his voice muffled by the glass. Eleanor held him close, her eyes closed, a small, contented smile on her lips. She was home. Inside, the warmth enveloped her. The smell of the tree, the lingering scent of dinner, the cheerful mess of wrapping paper in the corner. It was all a balm to her weary soul. She had been feeling her age lately, a quiet ache in her bones, a deeper ache in her heart since her husband Arthur had passed 2 years before. Christmas was the hardest time. Everything reminded her of him, but seeing her family, seeing Leo's bright face, made the journey worthwhile. After the initial flurry of greetings and updates, she placed the large box on the coffee table in the living room. "Leo, my dear," she said, her voice soft and a little raspy. "I brought you something special." Leo's eyes widened. With careful, reverent hands, Eleanor began to untie the string. Inside, nestled in yellowed tissue paper, were the pieces of a nativity scene. It was old, very old. The figures were made of painted wood, their colors slightly faded, their edges worn smooth by generations of hands. "This," Eleanor said, lifting out the small wooden stable, "was your great-great-grandmother's. She brought it with her from the old country." She placed it on the coffee table. "And this," she said, handing Leo the figure of a shepherd, "was your grandfather's favorite. He used to say this shepherd had the kindest eyes." Leo took the small figure with a seriousness that touched Eleanor's heart. Together, they began to arrange the scene. Mary, with her gentle, painted-on smile. Joseph, stoic and protective. The little wooden sheep and cows. Each figure had a story, a small piece of family history that Eleanor shared as they placed it. It was a ritual, a way of connecting the past to the present, of weaving Leo into the long, strong thread of their family. They placed the manger, and then the tiny, swaddled figure of the baby Jesus. The scene was almost complete. "Now for the most important part," Eleanor whispered, reaching back into the box. She rummaged through the tissue paper, her brow furrowed slightly. She looked again, more carefully this time, a small frown creasing her forehead. "That's odd," she murmured. "That's very odd. What is it, Grandma?" Leo asked, his voice full of concern. "The star," Eleanor said, her voice barely a whisper. "The Star of Bethlehem. It's not here." She emptied the box, shaking it slightly. Nothing. She checked the tissue paper, the floor around her. The star was gone. It was a small star, made of tarnished silver, with a tiny, almost imperceptible blue gem at its center. Arthur had given it to her on their first Christmas together, a replacement for the one her family had lost. It was, without question, the most precious piece of the set. A wave of disappointment, sharp and sudden, washed over her. It felt like a small hole had been torn in the fabric of her Christmas. "Oh," she said, trying to sound casual, but her voice trembled just a little. "I suppose it must have gotten lost over the years. Maybe in the move, we can make a new one." Leo said eagerly, ever the problem solver. "We can use tin foil." Eleanor managed a weak smile. "That's a very kind thought, my love. But it wouldn't be the same." She sighed, a small, sad sound. "It's all right. The scene is beautiful, just as it is." But it wasn't. Not to her. It was incomplete. A king without a crown. A night sky without its guiding light. They cleaned up the tissue paper and the box, and soon the house grew quiet once more. Leo was put to bed, the adults retreated to their rooms, and the house settled into the deep slumber of Christmas Eve. But Eleanor couldn't sleep. She lay in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, the missing star a weight in her heart. It wasn't just a piece of metal. It was a memory. It was Arthur's voice on their first Christmas, his clumsy fingers trying to place it on top of their tiny first tree. It was the symbol of hope she had clung to during difficult times. Its absence felt like an omen, a small dark cloud on an otherwise perfect day. After an hour of tossing and turning, she gave up. She slipped out of bed and padded downstairs to the kitchen. She thought a glass of warm milk might help. As she waited for the milk to heat on the stove, she found herself staring out the window over the sink. The window looked out onto the backyard, onto the silent, snowy world. And there, standing in the center of it all, was the snowman. He looked so peaceful, so serene in the moonlight. The snow had stopped falling, and the world was bathed in a soft, silvery glow. The snowman seemed to be glowing himself, reflecting the light from the moon and the few remaining windows in the neighborhood. Elinor felt a sense of calm wash over her. She thought of Arthur and how he loved the snow. He would have loved this snowman. A sudden impulse seized her. She wanted to feel the cold air on her face, to connect with that quiet, beautiful stillness. She wrapped her robe tightly around herself and went to the back door, unlocking it softly. She stepped out onto the small wooden porch. The air was sharp, clean, and bit at her lungs. It was exhilarating. She took a deep breath, the scent of snow and pine filling her senses. Her eyes scanned the yard, taking in the pristine beauty of the night. And then she saw it, a tiny glimmer. It was a small point of light catching the moonbeam. It was on the snowman. More specifically, it was on one of his arms, on a small twig-like finger. It was a tiny, intermittent spark of silver and blue. Her heart gave a strange, hopeful lurch. What could it be? She walked off the porch, her slippers making no sound in the fresh powder. She moved slowly, almost reverently, across the lawn, her eyes fixed on that tiny, mysterious light. As she drew closer, her breath caught in her throat. There, nestled perfectly, almost as if it had been placed there, was the Star of Bethlehem. It must have fallen from the box when she carried it in from the car. A gust of wind, a random chance, had lifted it from the driveway and carried it through the air, depositing it gently on the outstretched, waiting arm of the snowman. It wasn't just lost, it was found. It was kept safe. With a hand that trembled slightly, she reached up and carefully plucked the star from the twig. It was cold to the touch, but it felt alive in her palm. She looked up at the snowman, at his two stone eyes and his gentle, smiling mouth. In that moment, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not just for finding the star, but for the silent, unknowing guardian who had kept it safe for her. It felt like a message, a small, personal miracle from Arthur, a whisper saying, "I'm still here." She clutched the star tightly and walked back to the house, a new spring in her step. Leo, who had heard the soft click of the door, was standing at the top of the stairs, rubbing his eyes. "Grandma, is everything okay?" Tears of joy welled in Eleanor's eyes. "Everything is wonderful, my dear," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I found it. I found the star." Together, they went back to the living room. The little nativity scene sat on the coffee table, bathed in the soft glow of the Christmas tree lights. Eleanor handed the star to Leo. "You do the honors," she said. Leo, with the utmost care, reached out and placed the small silver star on the very peak of the wooden stable. And in that instant, something magical happened. The tiny blue gem at the center of the star, which had been dark for as long as Eleanor could remember, flickered, and then it glowed. It wasn't a bright artificial light, but a soft, warm, pulsating golden light, like a captured piece of the original star from Bethlehem. It bathed the entire scene in a gentle, holy radiance. The painted faces of Mary and Joseph seemed to soften, to come alive. The tiny figure of the baby Jesus seemed to glow with an inner warmth. It was no longer just a collection of old wooden figures. It was a sacred moment, frozen in time. Leo gasped, his eyes wide with wonder. "Wow," he breathed. It's perfect." Eleanor put her arm around her grandson, pulling him close. She looked at the beautiful, complete scene, and then her gaze drifted to the window, to the silent, watching snowmen in the yard, and she understood. It wasn't just a random accident. It was a small piece of Christmas magic. Outside, the sentinel felt the change. Through the window, he saw the flash of golden light that erupted from the room. It wasn't a sound, but a vibration in the cold air, a wave of emotional warmth that passed through the cold glass and enveloped him. His coal eyes, which for hours had absorbed the blinking, colorful lights of the other houses, now fixed on that single, steady, golden light. It was different from the others. It wasn't loud or frantic. It was quiet, profound, filled with a meaning that he, in his primal innocence, was beginning to understand. He saw the grandmother and grandson, their faces illuminated by the star's light, embraced in silence. He felt the wave of contentment that emanated from that small scene. It was a warmth that had nothing to do with fire or bodies huddled together. It was the warmth of completion, of a love so pure it could light up the dark. And for the first time, the sentinel understood. His cold, still body was not a prison of solitude, but a crucible of purpose. He was the silence that allowed the music to be heard, the darkness that made the light shine brighter. The star had rested on his arm not by chance, but by necessity. Hope, in its purest form, needed a guardian who was patient, who asked for nothing, who was content to simply be. He was that guardian. His solitude was transformed from a state of being into a sacred duty. I watched this silent revelation from my sleigh as we soared over the silent houses of Winchester Falls, my reindeer. Sensing my contemplative mood, flew with a gentler, more rhythmic beat. I had seen so much Christmas joy that night, the squeals of children discovering bicycles, the tears of grandparents receiving a long-distance phone call, the quiet contentment of couples sharing a glass of eggnog by the fire. But this was different. This was the quiet, invisible machinery of Christmas, the part no one ever sees, the part that makes all the rest possible. I thought of the millions of people across the world who, like that snowman, feel themselves to be on the outside looking in. The lonely, the forgotten, the quiet observers. I realized in that moment that they are not just bystanders. They are the guardians of the flame, the silent sentinels who hold the space for hope to be born. Inside the house, the magic continued to unfold. Eleanor and Leo sat on the plush rug, the warm golden light of the star washing over them. Leo reached out a small finger and gently touched the glowing star. "It's warm, Grandma," he whispered, his eyes wide with awe. Eleanor smiled, a real deep smile that reached her eyes. "It is, my love. It's filled with a lot of love." "Did Grandpa Arthur touch it a lot?" Leo asked, his voice soft. "Oh yes," Eleanor said, her gaze distant, seeing a ghost in the warm light. "Every single year. He would say that the more love you put into something, the warmer it gets. He said this star was warm with all the Christmases we'd ever had, and all the Christmases we were going to have." She paused, a single happy tear tracing a path down her wrinkled cheek. He would have loved this, Leo. He would have loved that you found it. But how did he get on the snowman's arm? Leo asked, the practical, curious nature of a 10-year-old reasserting itself. Eleanor looked from the nativity scene to the window, to the silent, stoic figure in the yard. I think, she said slowly, choosing her words with care, that sometimes, when you lose something precious, the world helps you look after it for a little while. The snowman is very still and very patient. He's a good keeper of secrets. I think he was just keeping it safe for us until we were ready to find it. Leo considered this, his brow furrowed in concentration. He looked at the snowman, no longer seeing just a pile of snow, but a character in their story, a silent hero. So we should thank him, he said, with the simple, profound logic of a child. Yes, Eleanor whispered, her heart swelling with a love so powerful it almost hurt. Yes, we should. They sat there for a long time, not speaking, just basking in the glow of the star and the quiet understanding that had passed between them. It was a moment of profound connection, a thread of memory and hope weaving together 3 generations. The great-great-grandmother who had brought the scene across the ocean, the grandfather who had cherished it, the grandmother who had almost lost it, and the grandson who had helped find it. And outside, the silent guardian who had watched over it all. I continued my journey, but my heart remained in Winchester Falls. As I delivered presents to the sleeping children of Paris, the lights of the Eiffel Tower seemed a little cold compared to the warm glow of that single star. As I flew over the pyramids of Giza, their ancient majesty felt less profound than the simple wisdom of a snowman. I had spent centuries celebrating the grand, the loud, the spectacular. But tonight, I had been reminded that the truest magic is often the quietest. It's found not in the grand gesture, but in the small, unseen act of care. It's found in the patient stillness that guards a flicker of hope. The night deepened. The moon began its slow descent, and the world grew even quieter. The sentinel stood his vigil, a silent, white statue against the deep blue of the dying night. He was no longer just an observer. He was a part of the story. He was the stillness before the dawn, the quiet breath before the first cry of Christmas morning. He felt the slow, rhythmic pulse of the sleeping world, the collective dreams of a town at peace. And he felt the small, steady beat of the golden light from the window, a heart of hope beating in the darkness. Then, slowly, imperceptibly at first, the eastern sky began to lighten. A soft, pearlescent grey bled into the deep blue, then a faint blush of pink, and finally, a brilliant, fiery orange. The sun rose on Christmas Day. Its first rays caught the edges of the snow-covered rooftops, making them glitter as if they were dusted with diamonds. The light spilled across the lawns, painting the pristine snow in shades of gold and rose. It touched the sentinel, and for a moment he was no longer white, but a brilliant, blinding gold, a fiery angel of the dawn. The world woke up. A dog barked in the distance. A car started. The silence of the night was broken by the gentle, promising sounds of the day. Inside the house, the family began to stir. The smell of coffee brewing and bacon frying soon joined the lingering scent of pine. There was the rustle of wrapping paper, the delighted squills of children discovering their longed-for treasures, a new G.I. Joe for Billy, a Cabbage Patch Kid for their sister, a brand new baseball glove for Leo. But even amidst the joyful chaos of Christmas morning, Leo's thoughts kept drifting to the window, to the silent figure in the yard. After a hearty breakfast of pancakes and maple syrup, the children, bundled in their snowsuits and hats, tumbled out the back door into the bright, crisp morning. They were a whirlwind of energy, ready to attack the fresh snow with sleds and snowballs. But Leo hung back. He walked slowly, deliberately, towards the sentinel. Billy and Sam, seeing his seriousness, stopped their roughhousing and followed him. They stood before the snowman, looking up at him. The morning sun was bright, making his stone eyes sparkle. He looked the same, yet completely different. He was no longer just their creation, he was something more. He was the keeper of the star. "Thank you," Leo said, his voice quiet but clear in the still morning air. Billy and Sam, not fully understanding, but feeling the gravity of the moment, mumbled their own thank yous. They didn't play around him. They didn't knock him over or steal his carrot nose. They gave him a wide, respectful berth. They had built him, but on this Christmas morning, he had built something in them. A sense of wonder, a feeling of respect for the quiet, unseen magic of the world. And I, from my vantage point at the North Pole, having completed my long night's work, watched the scene one last time in my magical sphere. I watched the three boys play in the snow, watched the family gather on the porch with steaming mugs of cocoa, watched the sentinel stand his watch under the brilliant winter sun. And I understood. The true meaning of Christmas isn't found in the presents I deliver, or the carols that are sung, or the feasts that are shared. Those are all wonderful, beautiful expressions of it. But the true meaning, the deep, abiding heart of it all, is found in the quiet, steadfast love that guards the light of hope. It's found in the silent vigil of a snowman, in the treasured memory of a star, in the shared understanding between a grandmother and her grandson. It's found in the profound truth that even in the coldest, darkest winter, we are never truly alone. We are all watched over, protected, and loved by silent, patient guardians, both seen and unseen. And that, my dear child, is the greatest gift of all.